Right back in your lives. It is Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast, the first of many observations edition. There was a Bills practice, which means I was out there. He's Ryan Talbot. I am Matt Parrino. We were going to break down everything that happened at rookie minicamp. So most of the players here, I got the whole list here. It's mostly tryout guys, right? A lot of red names, a lot of people that we won't be talking about even as early as next week. But there were a few people in particular that I was paying close attention to today, and we're going to flesh that out a little bit. We talked to Brandon Beane, Dalton Kincaid, and Osiris Torrance after practice. A lot to get into here, Ryan. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. First rookie mini camp practice. It's always good to talk about some actual meaningful football here.
Seriously. And speaking of meaningful, it would touch our hearts if you save the date, May 20th, added it to your calendar. It is Shout live at Wingnuts, beers, wings, Bills. It's going to be awesome. Come out anytime after 6:00. We'll have the live show for you at 7:30. The in-house experience. Now you can hear the show. It'll be obviously broadcast live as well. And then we'll spend some time after hanging out beforehand too, just talking. What did you think of the Bills draft? What did you wish that they did? What are you looking for ahead of training camp? And then obviously we'll get into all that fun stuff as well. So I think the only place to start, Ryan, is Dalton Kincaid from rookie minicamp today. I think it's important to know this is his first football activity since the back injury last year. Doctors cleared him shortly before the draft, sent out a note to all the teams interested around the league, gave him full clearance. So he said a little bit today was about knocking the rust off. But man, it was an active practice for Dalton Kincaid. There were, obviously routes versus air are one thing, but there's a lot to get into even when they went into some 11 on 11, a bunch of different opportunities for him as a pass catcher. He dropped one. I think there was 3 or 4 other plays that he made during the team stuff. All were catches, and you saw flashes of the stuff that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks. I mean, he's very crisp. He's very fluid. The way that he runs out there, it's just like everything has a purpose. And that was what I took away from the first time seeing him. And then we got a chance to talk to Brandon Beane. Sean McDermott was supposed to talk. He was a little bit under the weather. So Brandon came and talked to the media instead. And I asked him about what's been different since you got him in the building, right? Because you have all this time where you spend scouting the player, trying to learn as much about him as you can, but you don't really have access to him like you do when he gets to town. And he said it's unbelievable to watch him work because he called him Steady Eddie. He never gets too high, never gets too low. He makes a good play. It's the same thing. Very steady. He makes a bad play. He's right back in the huddle. He's ready to go on to the next play. The facial expressions don't change. It's actually really impressive to watch. I thought it was a really nice day. You don't take too much from the stats of it all, right? Like 3 or 4 catches, 1 drop. Okay. The 1 drop was a tough play. And the quarterbacks, let's this isn't Josh Allen out there throwing the ball. These 2 tryout players at quarterback, Quentin Dormady and Jalen McClendon. I don't think they're going to be hanging around for training camp, but a nice start for Dalton Kincaid.
I'm glad you used the word fluid. I was going to use that word. No wasted motions. I saw that a lot in his game tape at Utah, and there were just video clips shared here and there on social media today, but you saw it. Brings in the catch, turns upfield, and he goes, and he has a plan with the ball. The Bills like him because of the ways they can utilize him. He is not just a tight end. He can be that big slot for the team. You can do different formations with him. And you got to kind of see a little bit of it today, a small taste. I'm glad you brought up the back injury, this being his first time out there since then. Without that back injury, I don't think the Bills come close to being able to get him in this year's draft. So while it was probably a concern to some teams, that might have been the reason why he was able to fall into those 20s where Buffalo could then grab him and utilize him. And I think he has all the makings of being a weapon in this offense, Matt.
Yeah, and I think that the one thing that stood out too when we got to talk to him after practice was he was asked if he had talked to Josh Allen yet. And Josh Allen actually spoke about this on the Kyle Brandt podcast earlier this week, that he hasn't really spent any time yet interacting with him. And Kincaid brought up a good point. It's like when you first meet somebody, right? Of course, they exchange the text around the draft. it's important to like have that in-person experience, to start building the relationship. And it's almost like maybe they're just waiting for that part of it. Obviously Josh Allen kind of running around doing a lot of different things. Was at the Kentucky Derby recently, probably playing a lot of golf. Kincaid's a big golfer too, so I'm sure they'll probably get together at some point on the golf course. But I think that he seems really comfortable in the role. And I think that he was always going to be that. Like as a pass catcher, we can't really go too much into where he lined up, but I can say there was one rep. Actually, let me bring it up here. Against he went against multiple, and I didn't write my story yet, so this isn't all offhand. I'm going off of my notes. He lined up several times with UDFA Kyler McMichael. There were 2 or 3 instances where they went back and forth, and I thought McMichael did pretty well for himself. Like I'll give him a shout out here. You're going against a first round draft pick as a UDFA guy in practice. And that was really good. And there was actually the one incomplete pass. Sorry, I got to get out my handy dandy notebook here.
So while you're looking, Bills Mafia,
go ahead,
this notebook, first of all, like I'm with Matt at training camp a little bit here and there. Matt missed his calling being a doctor because he's the only one that can probably read those notes, but he takes the most detailed notes. So as he's going through this right now, he's looking for the exact play, and I'm sure he'll have some great notes on what happened here. So yeah, someone that's seen that notebook firsthand. Go ahead.
Listen, I don't have glasses, but I might need them reading some of this chicken scratch. On his first rep, he beat McMichael off the line. It was a really, really nice move. And number 4, Quentin Dormady threw the ball, was batted down by Marvin Wilson. He is a tryout player, defensive tackle. I gotta find this one. You're right, Ryan. I gotta take better notes. This isn't.
You do take good notes, but real quick, Marvin Wilson, that's a guy that I was interested in a few years ago. He went undrafted. I believe he played at Florida State, if I'm remembering correctly. Big tackle. He was in the league, I want to say, with the Cleveland Browns, but I was interested to see him on that tryout list. I like that the Bills are turning over, leaving no stones unturned in terms of Marvin Wilson, Shane Ray, a 2015 first round pick. I mean, they're bringing in all these options to try to find someone that can maybe help them on that defensive line. So I did like that.
Shane Ray was an interesting one, and Brandon Beane was asked about that today. And he said, listen, we didn't, the Bills didn't have an edge rusher that they landed in the draft, or even anybody that they're, they're excited about Klein, the kid that they picked up last week. And he mentioned that as well. But this is another guy that obviously has some pedigree. It didn't work out for him. I believe he played a little bit in the CFL. Bring him into camp, see if he's somebody that you want to extend an invitation or you want to sign him for training camp. We'll see. But he also, Brandon Beane, did not close the door on potentially signing another edge rusher, a veteran guy to kind of throw into the mix ahead of training camp.
And there are some great names, and we've talked about some of those players that are still available on the market off the edge. And maybe it won't be one of those premier players, but there are suddenly some level 2, level 3 guys becoming available that have been let go elsewhere in this league or that are still sitting out there. So I'm sure that if the Bills don't like what they have in the room and are looking for more options, and when I say don't like what they have, don't like the amount of depth that they have. When they go into training camp, they want to have battles at all positions. So it wouldn't shock me if they did address that whatsoever with one of the names that are still on the market.
The one drop was when I believe it was McClendon saw some pressure up the middle. He was looking to get rid of it. He was looking for Kincaid, and it was defensive tackle DJ Dale, who the Bills signed as an undrafted free agent, going one-on-one with Osiris Torrance, won that matchup a little bit, gets into the backfield, gets his hands up. And again, listen, there's no pad, so you don't want to overreact to this kind of stuff. Quarterback tries to get rid of it. It wasn't a great ball, but Kincaid's not able to, bring it in. But 2 plays later, after a Jalen Wayne catch, was really nice, and I wrote it down in my notebook here. Kind of took it up the right sideline. High ball, McMichael in coverage again. Kincaid goes up and gets it, and it's like, wow, that's where you start to see the athleticism. It was a high ball. He had to really get up and high point the thing, makes it, and there was never a doubt. And so again, rookie minicamp. You don't want to overreact to this stuff, Ryan. I did upload a video clip here. I'm debuting it before putting it out on any of my social media platforms, because why not give the podcast listeners the first look? Nothing too spicy, but just a quick look at Dalton Kincaid. Why not? We're out of practice. We want to bring you onto the field with us for the time that we're able to put to be out there. But I think overall, a really nice first practice for the tight end, who some want to call a wide receiver.
Yeah, and again, you said it. It's rookie mini camp. You don't want to get too high, too low. But he made a play. He made a noteworthy play, and that's better than just saying, "Well, it was a quiet day for him. He didn't really do much." You would rather have him have those standout moments. You mentioned Jalen Wade, cousin, I believe, of Reggie Wayne. I don't think nephew, I think cousin. Interesting, bloodlines there. The Bills have some intriguing names. Then you also mentioned DJ Dale, formerly of Alabama. So, the UDFAs are almost just as interesting as some of these rookies that they drafted coming in here, and it'll be interesting to see. Obviously not the UDFAs will stick around, but who on these mini camp tryouts, do any of them end up landing a contract with this team? Something to certainly watch.
It's always funny to be back out at the practice field for the first time, get that first kind of shade of sunburn. And I know a lot of Bills fans end up yelling at me like, wear some sunscreen and everything like that. I know I'm so bad at it. I got to do better at wearing sunscreen. But I'm weird. Like, I like that first kind of like sun of the year, because I feel like it gets me into football mode, right? Like I don't know. It's like a mental mindset thing. I really like that. I know that's probably horrible.
No, it might be. I have something where I have too many red blood cells, so my skin's already pretty red. So when I get a sunburn, like I'm like deep red, almost purple, and people like will look at me with a high level of concern. So I definitely have to stay on top of that when it comes to the sunscreen. But yeah, no, I totally get it. I mean, it means that warmer weather is here. It means the weather that we've been waiting for months is finally here. So I get it. It's football weather. You go out there, you're doing your job, and you get a little bit of color along the way.
What is your, like, if you're looking at the rookies, I didn't get a lot of looks at Dorian Williams today, and I was kind of disappointed about that. I was kind of hoping to see a little bit more of him, maybe see some of that speed flash out there. But again, without pads, it's hard to really take anything away from it. I have another clip here of Kincaid. Let me play that before we move on. But I thought Torrance today, like, let's move on to him for a few moments. I don't have a lot on Dorian Williams. Sorry if you were tuning in for that. Torrance I was watching him specifically. Brandon Beane mentioned it afterwards. Torrance mentioned it as well. I think we could kind of talk about that. He kind of played both spots. And so I think the question was, all right, what's your plan for them? And Brandon Beane said there is no plan right now, definitively. They want to work him at both spots. And I thought that he looked comfortable out there. And again, he's going to get up against guys that, it's going to be totally different in a week, right? Like, it's going to be a different level of competition, different level of experience. Right now, he was even talking about playing next to his old buddy, Richard Garage there, who was standing next to him during a lot of reps. And they talked about how cool that was, going from Florida to now with the Bills. And then on the other side of on the outside of the Justin Shorter there as well. That's very rare to have three teammates in one rookie minicamp. So that's kind of a cool little side story. But I thought first impression is I was expecting Torrance to look bigger, and he plays big enough. Like, you feel like some of the power when you're watching him, when guys are going up against him. There was that one rep by DJ Dale that I mentioned, but he didn't overwhelm me with the size profile. And again, there's no pads yet. And I think part of the size, element that comes into play is when you watch a guy in pads play and move people, right? Especially on those line moves, plays. But that was one thing. He looked a little bit smaller than I was anticipating.
That is interesting to me. And, Osiris Torrance is going to be one of those players where, like you said, a week from now, level of competition ramps up, and I want to see how he looks out there in terms of the comfort level, holding his own. because I think the Bills would like to get him into the starting lineup right out of the gate if possible. The one thing about Torrance that I thought that he said today that was interesting, and shout out to Sal Capaccio for mentioning this, is when you're working with the Bills O-line coach, the technique is kind of based on like your size. It's not like one size fits all. So he found that kind of interesting, and that Aaron Cromer does that when he's working with the players, because in terms of sheer size and weight and what we read about him, he is a bigger offensive lineman. He's a smaller. So I like the fact that Cromer is working and playing to each player's strengths when he's working on techniques. And that's going to be something to monitor throughout his rookie season.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And it's something that I've kind of talked about on a couple podcasts over the last, or radio shows over the last couple of weeks since the draft. It's like, I think when you land at a place where there's this certain profile that a lot of players, I mean, like, if you look across their offensive line from Deion Dawkins all the way over to Spencer Brown, athleticism, the ability to move and be mobile as a blocker, I feel like they've placed a premium on that, even with the addition of Aaron Cromer on the other side of Bobby Johnson, and how that offensive line looked under him. And I think that there's upside to Cromer, who has all of these kind of innovative ways to, get the most out of a player. And that's exactly what Torrance said. He's like, I like playing for a coach that wants to put me in a position to be the best version of myself somehow. I think they can take pieces of what other guys on that line do well and help Torrance in that part of the game. So he doesn't always have to just be this anchor, set and anchor, like in between the tackles, like always not being able to move around a little bit. I think that there's opportunity, especially now looking at him in person and kind of looking at that size profile, where they might be able to get him in the training room and work on some of the agility stuff and maybe get him out in space. I mean, could you imagine his 330 pounds or whatever it ends up being, coming downhill at you? I know he's a little bit flat footed, he talked about, but if that's something they're able to add to his repertoire, that could be a bit scary.
Yeah, it'd be very scary. And Roy in the comments says 6'5", 345, and he looked small. Curious. You have to remember something though too. When you're in the Bills locker room, you're seeing these players. There's guys like Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle, 6'8", 6'8" guys, and when you're 345, yes, it sounds like a lot of weight, but a lot of these pros carry it a lot different than average Joe Schmo. So they don't look up to that playing weight too. So I think Matt's just saying that, you get something in your mind. You see the pictures of him. You see that draft picture in the suit where it looks like he's cradling the football, like he's palming that thing. So he just meant that, didn't necessarily match up with like that giant maybe that he had in mind, but still a big guy at 6'5", 345 for sure. Getting that.
He's 6'5", 330. He's 6'5", 330. So
now?
let's correct
Okay.
that. Yeah, he is 330.
Right.
That's his official scouting report. I don't know if what he's listed at. Maybe the Bills listed him at 345. I'm actually going to look that up real quick just to double check.
Sometimes
but he definitely did not look 345 today. Like
right.
I'd be shocked if he was.
So yeah. So that's just something there, Matt. There is a question in the chat that I think
bring it up. Let's
put it right on here.
The Bills list him at 330 as well. So he's at about 330.
Charles wants to know anything with the wide receivers. Shorter and Shavers.
We got a lot on Shorter and Shavers. And honestly, I don't want to be hyperbolic or overreactive. If we tell you things on these shows, you have to use a little bit of maturity and perspective and know that, okay, what is the setting that we're talking about? It's practice. It's the first practice, and there's no pads. So everything that we're taking from this, I don't think needs to be extrapolated into these big, grand, definitive takes on players, right? I will say, though, today, Shavers jumped out at me a little bit. I really was impressed with his quickness, his elusiveness at the line of scrimmage, his footwork at the line of scrimmage. Like, that's a big piece of being a receiver, right? Is like your ability to separate right at the line of scrimmage. And of course, separating against a lot of like tryout guys for the most part, outside of like Austin and who was the other, I'm going to keep going back to this list over and over again. McMichael. those two guys, like they were a level above what I think everybody else
Mm-hmm.
was out there. And so, of course, Shavers is in a spot where he's going to look good at times. Like we have to understand that, but I don't think Shorter looked bad. He had one really bad drop, and it came at the end of a route where he really just struggled, and it was against a tryout cornerback, Chris Westry, number 22. It was great coverage. I mean, Shorter tried multiple things on the route, couldn't break free, and then the quarterback, who I believe was Dormady at the time, tried to like fit one in at the end of the play, and he did find an opening. And by the time Shorter established himself once again, he couldn't bring it in. And hands a little bit. He had one drop in routes versus air that you're kind of like, it wasn't a great throw, but again, you want to see the hands in those moments. It didn't just jump out. I just think in a very, very short sample size, Shavers was a little bit more impressive today to me.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm glad, though, you prefaced it by saying, keep in mind all these things, because last year, not yet rookie minicamp, but like a week from that, and when all the veterans came, I remember we were talking a lot about Tavon Austin. A lot of the Bills media was how great he looked, how quick he looked. Wasn't in pads, wasn't a lot of those other factors were at play, and he never ended up making that roster. So that's not to say Shavers won't make this roster, won't be a pleasant surprise over the summer, but you have to keep everything in context. But a good start for Shavers. Obviously, was Shorter. The Bills liked him enough. You saw it in that embedded that they put out there this week, where Brandon Beane literally said, "Hey, I'd be really excited if I could get Shorter in this round," and sure enough, they did.
The one thing somebody's asking about Sir Nathan in the comments about Dorian Williams. The one thing I will say about him, just observing him, again, no plays of note that he was in on or made. That again, they're not in pads, but he's definitely bigger. Like his profile is bigger than Terrell Bernard's. And I think that that's like an important differentiation, and that might mean nothing. And that might not even be something that they value necessarily. But I felt like Dorian Williams looked very comfortable. I felt like he was moving around pretty well. He just didn't factor in. I do have one catch here that I got to make sure that I talked about. Shorter going one-on-one with Joe Faucha, defensive back, got bumped pretty good. He came in at the end and gave Shorter a really good shot, and Shorter made the catch anyway in traffic. So that was a really, really nice play from Shorter. I thought that it was a nice way. It was towards the end of practice to end things, and I actually do have a Shorter video because why not? You gave some Kincaid. Let's give you a little Shorter. Here we go. He's huge, Ryan, by the way. Like the pictures, they do Justin Shorter justice. He was doing an interview off to the side afterwards and looking absolutely yoked. Brandon talked about this too. Like there's circumstances that go into every story, right? Like he said that a lot of players, they're not robots. You can't put them in these like compartments and just say they're supposed to be what they're supposed to be. Life happens, things happen, opportunities happens, lack of opportunities, all these kinds of things, injuries, obviously. And I think Shorter is like this like piece of moldable clay for Adam Henry, in an experienced wide receivers coach that comes in here, gets a chance to work with, of course, Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis, but guys like Justin Shorter that he can get in on the ground floor, and he needs a lot of molding, right? Like he's coming in as a raw player. He didn't have a lot of production in college. There's some, when you're that physically gifted and you only able to run a 4.55, watching him run out there, you could tell why. Like he takes, like he really lifts his legs like really high, almost like he's like churning a little bit, and I think that might slow him down. So maybe they work on some agility things, augment his running style, maybe even to a degree. I don't know if that's even possible. Something I can talk to him about or the Bills about. That could even be something, but there's definitely a player worth watching here in Shorter.
Yeah, and again, when the Bills are taking these players on day 3, they're looking at a lot of them the way that teams look at their undrafted guys. The Bills have a much better roster than those bottom teams drafting early, where the guys at the end are going to make their 53-man rosters. The Bills are at a spot where there's no guarantee these 6th and 7th round picks are going to be a lock for your roster, but there's someone that you're going to want on your practice squad, a priority guy, someone that you want to develop. And yes, they've lost a few players like that over the last few years because other teams then poached said players. But the Bills, when they draft these guys, they have a reason for it, and they believe there's some skill in there, there's some talent in there that they can carve out and bring out and add to the other talent in the room and the skill sets in the room.
Tough day for, real quick, Nick Broker. He could play all 5 positions. They had him in with a couple of like just really bad snaps. Now, I have to tell you, Quentin Dormady and Jalen McClendon, again, let's go back to this. This is not Josh Allen. So there was a little bit of an exchange problem on a couple shotguns, but just really bad snaps and a guy that I think, maybe nerves were involved. I didn't get a chance to talk to Nick. Maybe I get a chance to talk to him over the next couple of weeks, see how things are progressing for him. But just something worth noting that, he just had a couple of just really bad snaps, and it's something that, we'll keep an eye on there with him.
Yeah. And Broker, you like that he can play across those spots, but maybe he isn't as comfortable at center. Maybe he feels he's better off at guard. Nerves are a factor. I'm glad you mentioned the quarterbacks real quick. Are you familiar with Dormandy's story at all, Matt?
Now, is he coming from the XFL?
He is. And did you hear what happened to him this year?
No. Go ahead. Tell it.
So early in the season in the XFL, he got booted off of his team. And he was accused of giving his team's plays to an opposing player on another team. And they did this big investigation. They finally cleared him of it, and he ended up signing elsewhere. And he had this great game when he came in. I want to say it was like a 3-touchdown game, maybe 4. It just kind of had that. It was the most bizarre thing, though. Like, they're like, oh, yeah, he was accused of this. The team cut him right away. It was super bizarre, but he had that redemption arc, at least in the XFL, where he was able to come back into the league. I think it was after about 2 weeks. He was out of the league for about a 2-week span there. Came back in, and when he got to see the field, he had a really nice performance.
Somebody in the comments is talking about maybe you should have kept Dalton Kincaid slipping on his break to yourself. That's not my job there, worldwide stepper, is to take video and like just put out the best ones. Like, what? Like, it was just a look at him. Yeah, he slipped. I mean, it's slippery out there. I mean, it is what it is. I played 2. I'm sorry I played the one that you didn't like. I apologize. Real quick here, I wanted to get to a couple other things. Alex Austin looked really great. No specific route or play to discuss, but I thought it was a really nice day for him, just in terms of like the look of the player. Was where he was supposed to be. I thought he competed really well on a lot of routes. Maybe the ball wasn't going his direction. That's usually a good thing with a corner. I thought he had a really nice practice, and I think he's sneaky. One of those guys that I think is going to be like this year's. I don't want to put him in that Christian Benford, because Benford just soared. I mean, he started the opener. But I think he's definitely going to be like, the Bills have great eyes on day 3 for defensive back. And I think Alex Austin, to me, he has the looks of another guy that's going to be a guy for them to watch throughout all of training camp.
Yeah, I'm not going to compare him to Benford in terms of starting week 1 and being out there on the field, but I'm going to compare him to Benford in that he has a leg up on a lot of these other guys on this that they're at rookie minicamp. He might even have a leg up on some of the cornerbacks that are in that room, because he played in a multiple scheme in college, but they did a lot of zone defense, and he looked great in zone in college. So considering the Bills are such a zone-heavy team, when they drafted him late in the draft, I said, man, this is one of those guys, again, where fits the scheme, the talent's there, might end up being a sneaky pick for the Bills.
A couple more things before we get out of here. Number 1, London game. We didn't get too much into that on the show last night, and we had somebody that asked us our thoughts on the matchup, because it is interesting. Jacksonville is going to be out there for 2 straight weeks. Does that provide an advantage for the Jags. I don't know how much of an advantage. If anything, I'm almost wondering if that might be annoying to them. Like
Yeah.
you're on the road for 2 weeks, you're away from your family, you're away from your routine. Like the one nice thing about NFL travel is like you go to a city and then you're back within hours. Like even if you're West Coast, East Coast, you're still getting on a private plane, you're getting back probably, in a reasonable amount of time to uproot your life and be on location for 2 weeks. I think you could get a really annoyed, irritated Jacksonville Jaguars team that's just kind of itching to get back to the States.
And that's fair. And you can argue that the facilities aren't going to be, if the practice facilities, the training things that they need throughout the week might not be as good over there, what they're used to. I think though, from the being adjusted to being over in the London time zone, not having that lag, and I'm sure the Bills will go early in the week where they would expect that by that Sunday that wouldn't be an issue, but being there for 2 straight weeks is kind of an advantage in that sense. I did not like that Jacksonville was the choice because they are essentially London's team. They've been playing those overseas games at least one a year for quite some time now. And it's not like they have this huge following over in London. When you watch those games, there's about every NFL team represented in the stadium with jerseys. Um, but at the same time, there were so many other opponents you could have chosen for Buffalo to kind of put them in the same boat of you're traveling over at the same time, you're coming back. So I wasn't a huge fan of it being Jacksonville for that reason, being able to be there 2 weeks in a row. We'll see, though, how it plays out being the second week of that stretch for them.
Over 200 watching on late Friday afternoon here. Thank you so much for making us part of your day. As always, hit that like button, subscribe to the show as well. Fun first day of practice here. I consider rookie mini camp as part of that OTA month, right? Like where we'll get 3 weeks of the OTA practices, the mandatory mini camp. All of that is to come. So these observation shows are going to be regular over the next 4 weeks. One thing I do want to get into before we get out of here, Ryan, real quick, and we're going to clip this out and I'm going to publish it as a separate video so that I can point people to the video every single time because it's something that comes up quite a bit. I mentioned it on the show a lot of times. Like you and I in the jobs that we have, like we're not Bills fans. Like we grew up that way, right? Like, but something changes when you have to cover a team. And I think the best place to start to explain it to people, because in the comments, I mentioned it when you were having some internet problems yesterday in the show to Anthony when Anthony came in. And I mentioned that Ryan and I aren't Bills fans either. He's a Jets fan. And people in the comment, you're not a Bills fan. Like, but people like, it's almost like it hurts their heart. And I want to assure you all, it's okay. It's part of what we sign up for. Like the best way I can explain it is I've worked in professional sports now for 10 years, 5 years in the UFC, and now 5 years covering the Bills. And when something is your job, when you do something for like 60 hours a week, every single week, and I never sit down for a football game anymore and tune in as a fan and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you didn't make that play. You got to make that play. You got to dive for that catch. You got to make that tackle. I don't experience football that way anymore. When I'm watching a football game, I'm usually writing multiple stories. I'm planning for a podcast. I'm planning what I'm going to say on the radio. I'm planning questions that I'm going to ask players about their experience playing the game. So when you have all those things happening at one given time, it just changes the dynamic of how you experience the game. And even if I wanted to still be a Bills fan, because I do this every day for a job, it's almost not possible, even if I wanted it to be. Now, there's a caveat to this. I love Buffalo. My family, my friends, they're all Bills fans. They're all diehard Bills fans. In my heart of hearts, if the Bills win a Super Bowl, I'll be over the moon for all of you. I won't have experienced it the same way because I'm just not a fan anymore. It's my job.
Yeah, I like the part that you said about our families. My full family, diehard Bills fans. So if they win a Super Bowl in my lifetime and in their lifetimes, I'm gonna be so excited for them because they've, I grew up during that Super Bowl era of teams that lost 4 in a row, and I'll be thrilled for my family. But you're right. I've been doing this for about a decade now, a little longer, between Scout and NYUpSyracuse.com. And you go there, you're doing a job, you're not going into the locker room to and having those moments where like, oh, this is so cool. No, it's a job. You're there to interview players. You go to the press. It's something that changes over time, and I get it. It's different for Bills fans to hear that because we both grew up Bills fans. I still have memorabilia from when I was a kid, like that I've passed on to my kids. One of those huddles, stuffed animals of the buffalo from like the late 1980s and stuff like that. But NFL football, we watch the game with our eyes looking for stories, looking for talking points. And then I will say I do love college football. I watch Notre Dame passionately. I do yell at the TV quite a bit because it's Notre Dame and they haven't really been able to put together a great season, winning it all in my lifetime. But I still have those moments, but it's at the college level.
Yeah, the only time I'm really passionate about sports anymore, I'd say probably UB basketball, although it's been a tough couple of years. Like when they were going to the tournament, all throughout their season. You know what I've been into is the TBT tournament. Like when I watched the championship game, all of the old UB greats that went in there and they won that tournament last year. My heart was racing. Like it was an awesome experience. But really watching my son play baseball, like Little League baseball, I get really like dialed up for that, obviously. But it's okay. It's just like if another example that I can use to people, like say you grow up loving planes, right? Like you got those, like you make those little planes that you kind of like play with, or maybe you do remote control planes, and then you get a job working on planes, and then maybe you get a job flying planes, and you're like your whole life it's been one of your passions, right? And then after a while you're just like, all my waking minutes are spent on planes, and what was a passionate like love affair at one time in my life, now it's my work, it's my job every day. It just changes over time. It's not a bad thing. And also I don't want fans that think, oh, they're not Bills fans, so they can't I don't relate to them the same way. One of the things that I think makes our coverage unique is that we come from Buffalo, we come from this culture, and we cover it in a way knowing who we're covering it for. And I also say, I also don't want to downgrade or downplay what some fans do, like Joe Marino's of the world, Bruce Nolan's of the world. They're awesome. They're amazing content creators. The only difference is we're in the locker room, we're talking to these players. And so there's just a different relationship between the team and us because we're covering it every day and kind of in the mix a little bit more, where they're able to kind of watch from afar and still kind of maintain that fan experience, if you will. And they do awesome job. We have Joe on, we've had Bruce on. They're awesome.
Yeah, it's a different dynamic, and there's nothing wrong with having these great other options that do cheer for the Bills. And I see someone says you're not really a fan of any NFL team overall. No, not right now.
Mm-mm.
It's a job. It's watching. It's looking ahead to future opponents, things like that. You can still enjoy watching a game that has nothing to do with the Bills, sure, but no, not a fan of any other team. But like you said, because I grew up a Bills fan, when I see something on social media, when I see something elsewhere, I'll be like, man, I really think this will hit with Bills fans because I grew up a Bills fan. I still kind of know how they think and what they like, and that definitely helps me from a writing perspective.
He's Ryan Talbot. I'm Matt Parrino. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. We just wanted to get that out of the way because there was a lot of concerned comments last episode, and I didn't want to leave you all hanging. I wanted to cover that a little bit. May 20th, Wing Nuts. It's in the description. The link to set a reminder over on Facebook if you're interested in going. May 20th, we will be 8 days. It's coming up really quick. We're going to have a fun show in person. We'll eat wings. We'll drink beers. We'll talk Bills. It's going to be great. He's Ryan. I'm Matt. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.